Hello, this is Jack Jackson. We're going to talk about a few more interesting mathematicians who worked in the 20th or 21st centuries. I want to start with a mathematician called Nicholas Bourbaki. Well, it's kind of a lie. He's not a mathematician. He's actually a group of mathematicians. Um, It's the pseudonym for a group of mainly French mathematicians who published an authoritative account of contemporary mathematics. They started by writing an analysis text that they wanted to become the standard text for, at least for French mathematics or European mathematics during the time in the, around 1935-ish. The founding members were Cartan, Chevalier, Coulomb, Delaert, Dieudonné, Ersman, Mandelbrot, Pocel, and Weil. Um, and so all of these guys were, accomplished mathematicians individually, but they also got together and decided to write some things together. And I guess they had a little bit of a sense of humor as well because they invented this fictitious character, Nicholas Bourbaki, as their pseudonym. And here you can see some of the folks in that first group from 1935 in these pictures that you see here. Um, that this group has continued. In fact, I think they're still even publishing some things today. They were pretty active. Uh, this particular group was active at the beginning. Some different members have came in and out. And then later on, there was another group, and even a third generation is continuing to work today. So when you see Bourbaki, you know that that's actually a collection of folks. All right, here are a few others. Ludwig Silo was born in 1832 and died in 1918. He's from Norway. He was actually a high school teacher, but he proved one of the most foundational results in finite group theories, the Silo theorems. And the Silo theorems are, I think, one of the most beautiful things and most powerful things in finite group theory. Uh, Rather simple in one sense, but very, very powerful as well. And he was able to do that, a high school teacher in Norway. Camille Jordan was born in 1838, lived in 1922 in France. He did a lot of work in algebra, group theory, Galois theory. George Frobenius, uh, born in 1849, died in 1917. Also he's from Germany. Did group theory, representation, and character theory of groups. Andrei Markov, born in 1856 to 1922 is when he died. He was Russian. He did work in probability theory, especially in stochastic processes and what are now known as Markov chains. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about any of the mathematicians in this particular group, but these are all mathematicians that would be worth further study if you're interested. Here's another group of four. Hermann Minkowski. I've talked a little bit about him in an earlier video. Um, he lived from 1864 to 1928. He was German. He did work in mathematical physics, relativity, and geometry. Emanuel Lasker lived from 1868 to 1941, and he introduced the notion of a primary ideal in ring theory. So he was an algebraist, but he's probably best known actually because he was the world chess champion all the way from 1894 to 1921, one of the greatest chess players in the history of the world. Elie Cartan lived from 1869 to 1951. He worked in continuous groups, Lie algebras, differential equations, and geometry. He was actually one of the most important mathematicians of the early 20th century. Gino Fano lived from 1871 to 1952. He was Italian. He worked in projective and algebraic geometry, and he was considered the founder of finite geometry. There's a geometry called Fano's geometry, among others. William Gossett is interesting. He published under the name Student. He lived from 1876 to 1937 in England, and he was a statistician, and he came up with the t-test, which is one of the most often used test and hypothesis test in statistics. Now, why did he publish under the name student? Well, he worked for the Guinness Brewing Factory, and the Guinness Brewery did not want him to publish under his name, and they didn't want either trade secrets going out or whatever, but they allowed him to publish under the name student. So he was working on a bunch of small sample um, hypothesis testing and inferential statistics with small samples, and he needed to come up with a way to do that. Hence, he came up with the t-interval and the t-test. But to publish that, he couldn't publish under his own name, so he published under the name Student. But now we know that Student is actually William Gossett. George Ploya lived from 1887 to 1985. He was Hungarian and moved to the United States later. He is really known for his problem solving. Uh, He's also did probability, number theory, geometry, analysis, and combinatorics. R.A. Fisher, who lived from 1890 to 1962 in England, was extremely influential in statistics. He did design of experiments, analysis of variance, also known as ANOVA, maximum likelihood, applied statistics to genetics, and several other things that he did in statistics. So he's pretty much a giant in statistics. Uh, he actually had a bit of a feud with Pearson, who is another big person in statistics. Nowadays, people use both Pearson and Fisher's methods, but at the time they were very critical of each other. John von Neumann, who lived from 1903 to 1957 from the United States, worked in game theory, quantum mechanics, what are now known as von Neumann algebras, and he's especially known for being one of the pioneers of computer science. Philip Hall lived from 1904 to 1982 in England, and he worked in group theory. He's really largely responsible for, organizing group theory and presenting it in the way that it basically goes today. So he was very influential in group theory. Kurt Gödel lived from 1906 to 1978. Was born in Austria-Hungary, moved to the United States. He worked in axiomatic systems, and he was most known for his incompleteness theorem. Olga Todd lived from 1906 to 1995. She's from Austria originally, moved to the United States. She worked in algebraic number theory and matrix theory. Lars Alfors, I think we've mentioned him before as being a Fields Medal winner. He lived from 1907 to 1996 in Finland, and then in the United States, he worked in complex analysis, did a lot of important work there. When I was in graduate school, we actually used his textbook for complex analysis. So um, his textbooks were still at least being used at that point. And just a few more here. Paul Erdős, or Erdős. Erdős lived from 1913 to 1996. He was Hungarian, but he traveled all around the world. He worked in discrete math, number theory. He was a problem solver, and he was prolific in how many papers he published. And one thing is interesting, he was highly collaborative. So he published a lot of papers with other people. And there's actually something called an Erdős number. Erdős himself has an Erdős number of 0. Anyone who published a paper with Erdős has an Erdős number of 1. Anybody who published a paper with someone who published a paper with Erdős has an Erdős number 2, and so forth. And so that you can sort of do your degrees of separation from Erdős there, because he was so highly collaborative that there are a lot of people with low Erdős numbers. John Tukey lived from 1915 to 2000. He did a lot of work in statistics, worked with things like box plots and so forth. He also did work in fast Fourier transforms. Um, Benoit Mandelbrot, this is the nephew of the Mandelbrot that was part of Bourbaki. Um, he lived from 1924 to 2010 in Poland, later moved to the United States, and he did work with fractal geometry. This picture that you see below him is known as the Mandelbrot set, and he got a lot of interest in fractal geometry. He's actually a mathematician I've actually seen speak. Uh, Terence Tao, excuse me, was born in 1975. He is still alive and working. His parents were Chinese. He's from Australia himself and has moved to the United States. He won a Fields Medal. He did work in partial differential equations, combinatorics, harmonic analysis, additive number theory, and he is one of the top mathematicians alive today. Some folks would place him among the very, very best mathematicians of all times, and he is alive today. So, there are many, many more mathematicians that we could lift up, uh, but I think I'm going to stop at this point and let you examine and look for other mathematicians on your own. So there are some mathematicians of the 20th and 21st centuries.